They say everything comes at a cost. Steel, the backbone of modern life, comes with a price. A price measured in carbon emissions, a price paid by the environment, and a price that's becoming harder to ignore. But what if we could change that? What if you could maximize uptime, minimize downtime, while getting the best of both worlds? Greater efficiency, lower environmental impact, and enhanced safety. With systems spray-cooled, one-piece dual containment construction, and furnace enhancements that drive greater efficiency, it's the solution that delivers on every level. It's time to rethink what's possible in steelmaking. A new standard for the environment, for the workforce, for the future. Systems spray-cooled, the new green standard for melt shops.
Good morning, everybody. I'm George Koenig, Senior Consultant with Hatch and Chair of the Town Hall Forum. On behalf of Ron Ashburn and the AIST, it is my honor to welcome you to today's event. Before we begin, I want to point out the emergency egress area route in case we need to evacuate the room. Please exit the doors that you entered, turn left, and proceed down the escalators to an exit on the 3rd floor. As with many events that comprise the AISTech, this Town Hall Forum serves to disseminate new ideas that collectively improve the welfare of our industry. Our goal this year, as it is every year, is to keep the Town Hall Forum fresh. Once again, we've done our homework, and it's our expectation that you will walk out of this event with a better understanding of what's happening in our industry. The steel industry is stronger today than ever before, and we must remain committed to say the same a decade from now. To make it happen, we need company leaders who can articulate their vision not only for shareholders, but for all the stakeholders, including their employees, their suppliers, their customers, and even their communities. And we need to be held accountable in the complete value chain. We must aspire to build truly sustainable companies that are shining assets for our industry, for today and tomorrow. And we have the players in the House that are getting this job done, and you will be hearing from them shortly. For the Town Hall today, we will accept audience questions via email, townhall@aist.org. That's townhall@aist.org. Please include your name and company's name for the question to be considered. I also like to acknowledge our Town Hall Forum sponsor, as well as our premier AISTech sponsor, the Systems Group. We are indeed grateful to TSG for their support of this program. Thank you, Lee Morgan. I also want to thank our 2 global AISTech sponsors, Superbooth and Morgan Engineering, for their support. Please join me in thanking the Systems Group, Superbooth, and Morgan Engineering. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce the 2025 Town Hall Forum panelists. I ask that you hold your applause until each panelist is introduced. Starting on your right, we have Ron BEDARD, President and CEO of ArcelorMittal Dofasco. Dan KEOWN, Vice President and General Manager of Steel Dynamics, Columbus Flat-Roll Division. Nick Kohlhaas, Senior Vice President, Operations Steelmaking for Cleveland-Cliffs. Dan Colleen, Vice President, Gary Works, United States Steel Corporation. Ben Coing, Vice President and Chief Technical Officer, SSAB Americas. And Trevor Saunders, Vice President, General Manager at DJJ, a Nucor company. Please, let's give our panelists a warm welcome and a nice round of applause. Our moderator, back for his 16th year with the Town Hall, is John Delano, a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Haverford College and the University of Pennsylvania Law School. John is recently retired, Money and Politics editor at KDKA-TV, the CBS affiliate in Pittsburgh. We are pleased to have him moderate our Town Hall again this year. Please, a nice round of applause for John as he starts our program.
Thank you, George. Good morning, everybody. You can do better than that. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Nashville. My name is John Delano, and I'm honored to be your moderator for this 23rd Town Hall for the Association for Iron and Steel Technology. This brainchild of George Koenig and his partner Ron Ashburn is still going strong and continues to set new records for attendance both in person and now online. Each year, George and Ron are relentless in seeking out both the ongoing leaders and the emerging generation of leaders in the steel industry. After 2 decades, this town hall has become one of the steel industry's signature events, a chance to hear the candid comments of real insiders in the industry. So please join me in congratulating our town hall leaders, George and Ron. A special word of thanks to all the incredible AIST staff who do an amazing job at this annual gathering. Especially for me, Chris McKelvey for all the help on logistics, Shannon Kiley, our event manager, and Sam Cusick, whose knowledge of the steel industry always amazes me and who takes my calls at all hours of the day and night and weekends as I prepare for this program. As George noted, this is my 16th town hall as your moderator. It continues to be a great honor for me to be with all of you and these high-quality steel leaders, both on and off the stage today. It comes as I've just retired from 30 years in television broadcasting. For many years, and this last year in particular, I spent most of my time in TV land interviewing presidents, presidential candidates, governors, senators, elected officials, and many, many cabinet members. But none of this is as much fun as getting to know and learning from so many incredible leaders in the steel industry over the last decade and a half. Unlike some of the politicians I've interviewed, these steel leaders are candid, honest, and not afraid to tell it like it is. Every year we have a different theme for this town hall. Last year in Columbus, it was sustainable optimism for an industry that was future-focused, cutting-edge, and intent on creating a clean, green, digital steel machine and high-tech operation for the mid-21st century. A year later, we have a new president, a new administration, new trade policies, and frankly, an uncertain economy. So where are we in the steel industry today? Today's theme is Shake, Battle, and Roll, a really appropriate title for today's program. So let's talk to these steel experts and see what's shaking, battling, and rolling in steel today. Well, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
1 week ago today, President Trump's 100th day in office. Whatever many of us may think of this president, his conduct, or his policies, we all have to admit that the words shake, battle, and roll certainly describe his first 100 days. So the question for us this morning is, what does this all mean for the steel industry and the customers you serve? How critical are this new administration's policies on a range of issues? Or is the industry charting its own course into the mid-21st century? After all, presidents come and go, but the steel industry has been around since Henry Bessemer developed his really revolutionary steelmaking process back in 1856. And steel will continue to be critical long after the presidencies of Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump, the presidents during all of our 23 town halls. Before we get into some of the big issues, however, let me begin this discussion, as I have some of the other town halls in the past, with an overview. I want to ask each of you to give me one word that describes North American steel today. Just give me that one word, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about why you chose that word. So Ron Bedard at ArcelorMittal, let's start with you. What's your word?
I think, John, my word would be volatile to describe the current climate in steel.
Volatile, great. Dan KEOWN, what's your word at Steel Dynamics?
Before I give my word, I would just like to say thank you for having me on the panel. I'm very humbled to represent the nearly 13,000 families at Steel Dynamics, and I really appreciate this opportunity. And my word is investing.
Investing, great. Nick Kolas from Cleveland Cliffs, what's your word?
Underappreciated.
Underappreciated, okay, good. Dan Colleen from U.S. Steel.
Thank you, John. Opportunity.
Opportunity, okay. Ben Cowing from SSAB Americas. What's your word, Ben?
Thanks, John. My word is inspiring.
Inspiring, okay, great. And Trevor Saunders from Nucor, what's your word?
First off, good morning. Before I give my word about the industry, I must give my words to this crowd of gratitude to the suppliers. You know, Nucor wouldn't be possible without you, and most importantly to our Nucor teammates in the crowd for providing me the platform to be here. And my word will be transformative.
Transformative, okay. Great words, gentlemen. Volatile, investing, opportunity, underappreciated, inspires, and transformative. All right, let me give each of you a chance to explain to the audience, just take about 60 seconds. Why did you choose the word that you chose? Ron, you chose volatile to describe the steel industry today. What do you mean by that?
That word that I chose might have something to do with the side of the border that I'm on. And we're in Canada with tariffs. When we're investing, we're looking for long-term investments, long-term returns. And with the current tariff climate, we're being very, very deliberate in terms of any investments that we make.
Gotcha. Good. How about investing, Dan? That was your word.
Investing, to me, has multiple facets to it. We're investing in modern technology to continue to have a sustainable steel industry and provide the best product on the market. But part of our investing is also in the people, right? And this conference is part of that. And we're spending a lot of time and a lot of money investing in upcoming leadership and talent just to help us move this industry to the next level.
We hope to talk about that a little later on. Nick, I think your word was underappreciated. The steel industry is underappreciated?
Yeah, I think, a mixture of underappreciated and undervalued, John. You look at the course of the last, we'll just say 12 months, and where pricing of steel has been. And we've been really at the low of, we'll call it $600 per ton, hot rolled coil, US. That recently has changed and picked up to, I'll say, a more respectable number, where it's around $900 now. But the industry really isn't sustainable at $600 a ton hot rolled coil. And for our customers to buy it at that level for the length of time it did, it leaves an impact, and we're still feeling it today. So we're still underappreciated.
Underappreciated. Okay, Dan, your word was opportunity.
Yeah, so John, opportunity, first of all, it's a forward-looking word. It means what is here today is going to be better tomorrow. It provides a growth, it provides a path. So when we think about this country, we think about onshoring, bringing production facilities back, whether that's automotive, whether that's heavy manufacturing. We think about the tariff protection through 232, and then the tariffs on top of it. It is going to provide a tremendous opportunity for the men and women, specifically in this room, for growth. So a little bit of a news flash for everyone sort of thinking about it. The team members in this room are going to have opportunities for advancement, going to have opportunities for projects, going to have opportunities for growth, and that's across all levels. Sometimes when I think about it, I think even about the senior folks. We're going to have a lot of opportunity. Good luck retiring. You're going to be needed for a long time.
We're going to touch on that topic too. Some of us with gray hair care about that, I'll tell you. Ben KEOWN, your word, I believe, was inspiring.
That's right. As an engineer in the steel industry, I look at developments in recent years in terms of sustainability, productivity, product quality, and I get inspired, frankly. I think there's been more development recently than at any other point in my career. But even looking more broadly at the role that steel plays in the broader economy, I mean, steel is the solution for a lot of the problems that we face as a society with respect to, again, sustainability, building a secure manufacturing environment in our countries. So I find it inspiring to see the role that steel plays in society.
Great. Thank you very much. And Trevor, your word was transformational.
Yeah, I chose that word for three reasons, right? When I think about transformative, it means we're at an inflection point in the industry to where we'll remember this historic moment. And the three parts are, first is, as an industry, we're transforming our ability to tell the story about what the steel industry offers, how dynamic it is, and what we mean to the country right now. And our ability to attract talent is a significant change that we all have to collectively get better at telling that story. The second is, we're in this age of digitalization in and around AI, which might realistically be the new internet. And there's a global battle, and the U.S. needs to place itself at the forefront of that battle. And honestly, steel is at the foundation of that technology. So it's a transformative event that we have the ability to take part in. And the third part would be, we're all trying to figure out how to be more sustainable, how to decarbonize ourselves so we could retain being the cleanest steelmaking country in the world. So I think as an industry, we're under significant transformation for those three reasons.
Well, thank you very much, Trevor. I love all your words. And I think we're going to come back to each of them through the different parts of the discussion this morning. Thank you for sharing with us. I think there's one word that's dominated it, certainly the last couple months. Some of you mentioned it in your explanations, but that's the word tariff. Tariffs. That's not a word I spent much time with, truthfully, over the many, many years, although we are familiar with some of the tariffs in the steel industry going back to the first Trump administration. But this, as I noted, the steel industry is really no stranger to tariffs. In March of 2018, President Trump imposed a 25% tariff on imported steel using his authority under the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. And almost immediately, thousands of exclusion requests came in. Some 260,000 exclusions came in for steel, and many were granted. In addition, a number of countries from Canada and Mexico to the European Union and Britain received exemptions or negotiated lower tariffs, quotas, or other trade alternatives. Now, earlier this year, President Trump reinstated a flat 25% tariff on imported steel and revoked all the exemptions, which the White House said inadvertently created loopholes that were exploited by China. The White House statement in February claims that the president's first steel tariffs, quote, led to a wave of investment across the United States with more than $10 billion committed to build new mills, unquote. Statement from the White House. It also leads to the question, why are we importing steel into the United States anyways? Last year, I believe we imported 26 million metric tons of steel into the USA, mostly from Canada, Brazil, Mexico, South Korea, and the European Union. So, gentlemen, I'd like to talk about tariffs now for a little bit. Are they good for business? Is a 25% blanket tariff with no exemptions too blunt? Should we have different rules for our neighbors in Canada and Mexico? I want to start with that basic question. And Nick, I'd like to start with you if I could. I believe you've said to me and maybe to others that the 25% tariff in some cases, might not be enough. Tell us about tariffs from your perspective.
Yeah, so, we look at tariffs as being a good thing. In my opening word and explanation there, I talked about pricing, right? And tariffs are obviously impacting that here over the last couple months. And so, yes, we agree with the 25% across the board with no exceptions or exemptions. We recently have, made an acquisition in Canada of Stelco, the steelmaking company of Canada, and we're still, pro-tariff. We bought that steel company to produce and to supply Canada, and then we have our, domestic U.S. sites that will supply the U.S.
Are the trade policies that we've had to date part of the reason why you announced on Friday the closures, perhaps temporarily?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to your point that you brought up, I don't know that the 25% is even enough for certain products. I think, for say hot rolled coil, that might be fine. But there's still other products that need help, and we have our work cut out for us in certain products and segments of our business. The announcements on Friday were driven by low customer demand and low pricing, and then imports definitely play a part of that.
Let me ask some of the other domestic producers before I go to ArcelorMittal and get the Canadian view or even the Swedish view from SSAB. How do the others feel about tariffs in general? Supportive of what the president is doing here? Dan?
Yeah, I mean, U.S. Steel was a very big supporter and still is a big supporter of 232. The additional tariffs on top, I think, provides the industry with a lot of sustainability moving forward. From the administration's point of view, when we think about tariffs, and we think about the broad range of tariffs across the board, not just in the steel industry, the government has really made a stand to protect what we value. And we definitely value manufacturing in the United States, not just steel. We value automotive manufacturing in the United States. And when you protect what you value and you can do it across the board, not specifically to an industry, but across the board, it's going to provide value, growth, and sustainability moving forward. So when we think about specific products, is 25% enough? I think I agree. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But it provides us the opportunity to look at markets that have been impacted by tariffs, put together a solid business case of moving forward with opportunity to capture those markets and return value to steel, return value to this country.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the other Dan, because I believe you told me that tariffs, that there really isn't a good plan for tariffs yet, and that part of this is based on what the negotiations yield. Talk to us about that from your perspective.
At Steel Dynamics, we do believe that the tariff policy is going to be a net benefit to the domestic steel industry. But it's been kind of haphazard. It's been a shotgun approach, and it's got a lot of people a little worried about how they're going to invest or what they're going to invest in until they know what the rules are going to be. Right. And until you know those rules, it's hard to make good decisions, right? And part of those rules are going to affect the automotive supply chain, right? Those supply chains are very entrenched, have a lot of specifications, a lot of approvals, a lot of certifications needed, and it's hard just to pivot because tariffs come into play. Right, so we truly believe it's going to be a net benefit. We think 25% is a good starting point. But if you look at the recent core cases, anti-dumping and countervailing duties, some of those are as high as 150%, the preliminary duties. So we believe it needs to be a targeted approach to the countries that are really offending the supply chain.
Haphazard, I think that's the word I picked up in the. And a lot does depend on negotiations, as we know. And this president likes to negotiate, so we're just going to sort of wait and see on some of this. How about at Nucor, Trevor? What do you all think about these tariffs?
Yeah, I think to start, before you start talking about the numbers and the impact, I think it's important to roll back from the Nucor perspective, the concept of tariffs and what we're trying to accomplish. And at the end of the day, a healthy, vibrant steel industry is what the end goal is. And the ability for us as a group of competitors or a group of industry professionals to compete in the global landscape and ultimately win because the playing field is leveled, that's what the end goal is. And so we earlier talked about transformation and the global competitiveness and steel's part in that global competitiveness. So the health of the industry matters. So we do believe that tariffs are a vehicle that we could deploy that ensures that the playing field is leveled and that we have the ability to compete and have a healthy, vibrant steel industry without the threat of subsidized or dumped product. So we are supportive of tariffs conceptually.
Got it. All right, now I'm going to turn to our Canadian. Ron, you were just at the White House with the Prime Minister, visiting with President Trump yesterday. And as you know, the President issued on his social media platform, Truth Social, a statement shortly before that meeting. I'm going to read one line of it, basically talking about Canada, saying, this is the President speaking, "We don't need their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't need their lumber. We don't need," all in caps, "anything from Canada." Ron, do we need Canadian steel? What do we need from Canada?
I think consistent with all the answers that I've heard so far, our view in Canada and our ArcelorMittal is that we need fair trade. Both in the United States and in Canada, we need fair trade. In a perfect world, you wouldn't need government intervention to have fair trade. It's an imperfect world, so we need government intervention. And as I look out to the crowd, I've been coming to industry events for 38 years. If we're going to be self-sustaining and have all of the young people that we have here today and so many women, these crowds have turned over from the start of this industry. If I look now, it was 25 years ago, 30 years ago, it was all men in this room and all men my age. How are we going to be resilient? We're going to be resilient by competing on the playing field, by our products and our service being able to beat each other on fairly traded steel. And again, when government needs to intervene, I think that's the right thing to do. We have the same issues in Canada as we have in the United States. ArcelorMittal has a big footprint here in the US. And I would say that governments need to be quicker to react, both in the US and in Canada. The 25% tariff, I think, has shooken up a lot of our customers as well, the customer base. And customers are looking to make long-term investments, and customers are making big buy decisions. So they're on the sidelines waiting to see how this plays out. So that's got me quite concerned. But certainly fairly traded steel, John, is a big issue for our industry, and it's been a big issue for our industry for the 38 years I've been in it.
Well, let me see if I can understand what your position is with respect to the tariffs that President Trump is imposing. I mean, if I understand correctly, and I know you'll know the figures better than I, but I think Canada produces somewhere around, 12 million tons of steel, exporting 7 to 8 million tons to the USA.
Correct.
All right? Okay, so how do these tariffs affect Canadian, you don't have to give me specifics of your company unless you want to, but bottom line with respect to Canadian imports into the US, are these tariffs going to do damage to the steel industry in Canada?
Yeah, I think if I speak for the industry as a whole in Canada, there's been a tactical pause, if you will, on shipments into the United States. Not on all shipments, but on the shipments that aren't going to make financial sense after paying the tariff. I think in automotive, there's some discussion about automotive. We're taking a look at whether that makes sense in every single contract, but it's within USMCA. When it's within USMCA, then we're going to follow the rules of the game, and I think we can continue to prosper throughout the tariff period.
Gotcha. Thank you very, very much. Ben, at SSAB, I know that you sort of have a global perspective, perhaps a more global perspective than any of us, frankly, working with a Swedish company, but here in the United States. What's your sense of these tariffs? Do they make sense at all from your perspective? How do we address, maybe they will help to address problems of global overcapacity? I don't know. You tell me.
That's exactly where I was going to go, John. So tariffs are a simple tool. They promote domestic manufacturing. So we can discuss what are the appropriate levels or the specific implementation. But broadly, it's needed. And it is that context you just mentioned, global overcapacity coming from non-market countries. We in North America, we're making, and in Europe, we're in market economies. We need to make investments in steel capacity that return value to our shareholders in a market economy. And we're competing against folks who do not work in that way. I saw a report from OECD Steel Committee. I couldn't even believe the number. Over 700 million tons of steel, global overcapacity by 2027. China's increased their exports double since 2020. So we are facing, I mean, I remember a few years about talking about the wave of overcapacity that's coming. It's coming even more strongly now. And even the best steel makers in the world, the most productive, the best mills, cannot stand up to a flood of overcapacity at the global level. And every market-based economy needs to find a way to shield its producers from that global context.
And so tariffs help in that regard.
Yes.
With respect to the domestic industry. So I want to ask this question as sort of a follow-up. Specifically, how is or will these tariffs drive new investment for your companies in steel making? Are there products that are being imported into the U.S. that your company could make in the United States? This is what the president's talking about, more manufacturing in the U.S. And do we risk at all an overcapacity dilemma here in the U.S. at all? Or is that so far down the road? Anybody?
Well, John, I think you led us off really well with some facts and figures, right? So you told everybody 26 million tons of imports into the U.S. last year, right? There's no reason we couldn't have made that steel. There's no law of nature that says the U.S. has to be a steel importing country, right? You also talked about the effect of the last round of 232 and citing $10 billion of investment. I've actually heard the number 20 billion if you consider other sorts of investments in the industry. So we have evidence from that last round that investment has been happening. When you talk about specific products, there's probably some specific areas of opportunity different folks are strategically looking at. Obviously, as I said before, we're all in a market economy. Every investment we make, we need to think about the return to our shareholders, and we need to think about the long time horizon our industry has. We need to make investments that are going to pay off when the mill starts running, and investments that are still very good 30 years down the road. So absolutely, you know, those economic conditions matter.
Did I just see an announcement from SSAB about investing $74 million?
In Alabama, that's right.
Yeah. Is that part of this?
You know, I would say that the context matters for any sort of investment decision. All investment decisions are based on the expected return. So the specific investment in Alabama is about growing our quenched and tempered steel capacity, which is a long-term plan of ours. It's a focus of my company, that particular product. And so that's what that is all about.
Good, thank you. Dan, I saw your hand, and then we'll go to Trevor.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So, I mean, I think specifically when we think of imports and specific markets, NGO comes to mind for us here at U.S. Steel. So we look at the investment that Big River Steel put in. That was definitely a product imported. They're in that business now. Some others are. Some others are even in non-grain oriented, grain oriented as well. But that's an opportunity. Also for us at U.S. Steel, we have a large packaging business. That is a sector that has had a lot of imports. That is a sector that we want to compete on a level playing field to ultimately provide the end products that we can for our customers, okay? The United States has a great market, okay? And I think that's what everybody is very envious about. We have the market, we can capture it, as long as we can compete on an even playing field. And that's what our protectionism or our tariffs are doing for us.
Gotcha. Thank you, Dan, very much. Trevor.
Yeah, I mean, I like how you frame the question around capacity and capabilities. And, you know, to return to what Dan mentioned about confidence in the industry, what 232 is creating a landscape that allows us as a group of producers to be confident in the future and the health of the industry. Then once you have that confidence, we've got the ability to make investments in the right capabilities over time. And so if you look at the onset of 232, since it was installed, Nucor, for example, we've invested over $14 billion in additional investments and new capabilities within our business, plus an additional $6 billion in acquisitions. And so that is really on the ability to return on investment, but it's primarily related to our belief that if the industry is healthy, the supply-demand dynamics are there, and we invest in the appropriate capabilities, we'll be able to perform. And an example about capabilities that I'd like to point to is our Nucor Steel Brandenburg facility in Kentucky. And it is a plate mill that can produce about 96 to 97% of all of the plate required for American consumption. And that is an investment that is currently in ramp up, and it occurred post the first implementation of 232. That I must highlight that only about 18% but prior to the reset was covered due to all of the exemptions prior to Donald Trump returning to office. So I do believe that we are certainly capable.
Yeah, got it, good. Others want to comment on go ahead.
Yeah, I think young people getting out of university, getting out of college have choices. And when they see investments in our industry and they can see a tremendous future, whether it be in AI, in the shop, in the professional services, seeing that long-term investment, billions of dollars at each of our companies being invested in the US and in Canada, that gives young people a desire to be in our industry. 35 years ago at my first event, they said that we couldn't attract young people. It was going to be the end of the industry. We could not attract young people. 35 years later, we're attracting young people at an unprecedented rate that want to come and work in our industry. And so when we're making these investments, I think it creates excitement in the communities in which we operate. And that excitement translates to the very best people out of college wanting to come and work in our shops.
You're jumping ahead to our last topic, but I love it because I love what you're saying, and I certainly hope it's true. Dan.
I'm just back to the original intent of the question is I kind of agree with what everyone said on the panel, that with the 232 implementation, we saw a lot of investment take place. And COVID kind of threw a wrench in a lot of people's plans when the onset of COVID came out. So it delayed projects, it slowed down projects. And our projects are already projects that take a long time to put together, from design to construction to commissioning to startup. And COVID just kind of threw a wrench in that. We're seeing all that investment come to play now. So I do believe a new, well-thought-out round of tariffs will drive new investment.
Yeah. I think another question that relates to this is how quickly can some of this happen? Because investments are long-term, and they do take a while. And I noticed that yesterday the Commerce Department announced that the trade deficit in March was up 14%. A lot of that, of course, was anticipatory of the Trump tariffs coming in, people buying up ahead of time. And I also saw a report that steel imports were up 12% in March. That's not the direction any of you gentlemen apparently want to go. Is there a time frame here? Does anybody very quickly want to speak to, is this going to take a lot longer than people think to have an impact? Tariffs? Go ahead, Nick.
I think you look at it, and so we're importing 26 million, tons of steel. Will it take some amount of time to grow our domestic capacity to take over that 26 million? For sure, right? When you build a new plant, you're looking at anywhere, probably 4 to 5 years, easy. But again, with a level playing field, with the tariffs in place, it will at least keep things at a sustainable level for us, where we can be profitable at all our companies and then reinvest so that we can sustain and get to that new capacity.
Do any of you want to predict that when we gather a year from now, U.S. imports will be down because you're supplying the steel that should be supplied in the U.S.?
I don't know that we can turn it on that fast.
Nucor, you think you can, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you put that increase in context, right? I mean, the anticipation of an added cost to import steel created some fervor to where people got a flash sale discount and imported product prior to the implementation of tariffs. However, when you look at the capacity utilization rate of the country in the mid 70s and 80% of that capacity is EAF, the EAF capability to respond immediately to new demand is something that we have to take into account for. So if we aren't at full utilization, our ability to immediately respond to the new demand that is left over from imports, we'll happily be able to gobble up that space because we've got the capability to produce.
So you're saying you can respond faster than some of the others?
You said that.
I thought you said that, but let's give Nick a chance. Nick.
I do think Trevor makes a good point. It will drive utilization up. You know, even at Cliffs, we would love to bring the hot side at Dearborn back up, and that obviously would take care of some capacity. And there's also some new plants that have recently come online, like even Big River too, right? That I'm sure aren't fully up to speed yet, and as they do, they'll offset some of the imports.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for this really, really informative discussion on tariffs. I want to move ahead to another topic about production and, frankly, trade barriers and how it might impact raw materials and the like as we enter this age of protectionism, some might call it. As you know, the trade barriers that we're erecting in the U.S., tariffs or whatever, are causing a reaction in other countries as they impose their own barriers against us. And so the question is, to what extent are we dependent on other countries for what we need when it comes to steel making? And initially, I'm thinking of raw materials, iron ore, coal, and scrap. So the basic question is, in the age of protectionism, are we self-reliant for all our raw materials when it comes to steel making? And Trevor, I'm going to go back to you because you're the expert on scrap as the general manager of the David J. Joseph Company, which is Nucor's scrap subsidiary. Do you have any concerns about scrap supply at all?
Yeah, the guys told me that this is my subject prior to sitting here. So I guess I'll start with, ironically, this morning I received an article from 1995 that was discussing the same topic around, are we capable of being self-reliant when you talk about raw materials? And I say ironic because 30 years later, we're still having the same conversation.
Oh, yeah.
So what has happened over, you talk about 30 years ago, that's about half of Nucor's history. So what we've done, particularly as a company, but I believe as the industry as well, is because of that backdrop, we've decided to create flexibility in our mill landscape with multimodal access to rail, water, truck, and as a raw material arm of Nucor, we've diversified our access to multiple commodities that we can pivot in and out of to respond to whatever landscape, rather there's shortage or abundance. So we've put ourselves in a predicament that we are extremely flexible from our mills and our capabilities of supply. So then I restore back to the one thing that a lot of people may not take into account is the U.S. is a net exporter of scrap.
Yeah.
North of 13 million tons a year. So that obsolete reservoir is extremely deep. So when you think about self-reliance, if we're exporting it, then we have it to access.
Is that export business in danger because of trade barriers in other countries against the U.S.?
No, I wouldn't say in danger, right? I mean, you're talking about something that somebody else needs, and if there's a domestic home and the response of capacity utilization or new investments, there's an economic incentive to keep that material here. And generally, that's what we find in free, balanced, level playing field trade is where the economics of where material goes usually wins. And so we believe that there will be a home for that material, as well as the advance of technology that allows us to further clean or that material to consume for the type of products that we make in the U.S.
Got it. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Nick, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, just going where Cliffs is at on its raw materials. We're in honestly great shape. We have our iron ore mines up in Michigan and Minnesota, and then we acquired FPT back in 2021, so we have our own scrap supply, and then we also commissioned Toledo, the HBI plant, in 2020. So we have also some HBI briquettes to go around.
We also, doesn't the United States also bring in scrap from Canada and Mexico? What's the status of that under the current trade policies? Can you help, Ron?
Yeah, I think Canada, as well, is a net exporter of scrap. The big scrap companies in Canada find it attractive. The Canadian government's looking at whether or not that should be taxed on the way out to the U.S. To date, that hasn't happened. And I think, scarcity is generally an issue around the world. It's not an issue in either the U.S. or in Canada as it pertains to scrap. And much like I've heard across the panel, at ArcelorMittal, we have a very strong supply position on those raw materials that are critical to our business, being iron ore, scrap, HBI, DRI.
Do you now take coke? I know you're transforming your facilities to EAF, but you are still doing some blast furnace operations.
Yeah, we run 2 blast furnaces in Hamilton.
And are you taking coke from the U.S.?
So we have coke plants in Hamilton, but we're not self-sufficient. So we bring coke in from the U.S.
So what happens now?
That coke now is exposed to tariffs, Canadian tariffs. So we're paying tariffs to the U.S. and to the Canadian government on that material coming across into Canada.
So you will either be paying higher price for American coke coming into Canada, or you will find another supplier.
Or we will find a domestic supplier.
Is there a domestic supplier?
There is.
So you're going to be okay.
We'll be fine.
Good. Other comments? Yes, go ahead, Dan from U.S. Steel.
Yeah, John, I look at the specifically scrap, but I look at it more of the battle for FE, okay? It's getting iron units where we need them. U.S. Steel has a great position there with our mines in Minnesota, our ability to make DR pellets, our ability at Gary to push down pig iron to BRS, and really BRS to be shovel ready to do DRI, I think is an outstanding position. Also from the flexibility standpoint, responding to even markets, capacity, and demand, we're really situated in a very unique position. BRS2 is ready to come up, take a lot of that capacity. So when we talk about the flexibility, we talk about speed. I think we've got it covered on both ends. We're really strong about our position there.
So bottom line is you're okay.
We're in good shape.
You're in good shape. Dan.
I think it's a similar story for us. About 87% of what we melt is recycled material that we get domestically. We're always going to need some clean iron units, to Dan's point, for some of the products we're trying to make. But we're also investing in technologies that can actually clean scrap to get the residuals we need out, which is going to be an important move in the future for us to be self-reliant. And heck, I hired into Steel Dynamics to produce iron so we wouldn't be so dependent on scrap. So we were looking at these technologies almost 30 years ago so we wouldn't be so reliant on imported raw materials. So we're still looking at those technologies, and hopefully we're going to continue to invest in those so that we can make sure our supply chain's intact for a very healthy future.
Great. Ben, I know when you and I chatted earlier, I think you said to me something, you noted, as everybody else has, that the U.S. is the largest exporter of scrap in the world, actually. And I think you asked the question, and I'm going to ask you the question back, because you know the answer and I probably don't. Why are we sending 15 million tons of scrap out of the U.S.?
Well, it's really just the other side of that import question, right? Why do we not have more steel production in the United States? And it's economic factors in a world in which other players are not necessarily in a market environment. We are in a market environment. So investment is made to consume that scrap. There has been investment in the steel industry, but as of yet, the scrap goes out because we do not consume it. So if there were local consumers for every one of those 15 million tons, it would not go overseas. It would stay home and make steel products for the American industry.
So you're envisioning the day when the scrap is utilized here in the U.S.?
I would sure like to see that day. I mean, I think it's not going to come easily. It'll take a lot of will and support on the policy side, but it is certainly feasible. We certainly have the knowledge, we have the capability to make all the steel we need. It's just a question of having the right forces aligned to put that capacity in place.
I also understand that we do export some steel from the United States.
Oh, sure.
You know, I think the figure I saw was about 8 million tons to, this surprised me, 169 countries. So most of the countries of the world are getting some American steel in the process, which surprised me a bit when I saw that. Most of it's going to Canada and Mexico, if I understand correctly. The trade barriers, and this is the final question on this topic, will foreign trade barriers have any impact on your production of steel? We've sort of answered some of that. And the question of the relative strength of the American market. And the reason I ask the question is I just saw that Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, who I'm sure many folks have seen on television one way or the other, she says that with President Trump turning his back on free trade, these are her words, that Europe, the world's largest market, which it is, 16% of the world trade compared to America's 13%, that Europe, the European market, can up its game. Do any of you, and I'm going to go to you, Ben, first, we'll go to Ron too, as our, quote, foreign experts. Is that going to happen? Will these trade policies allow Europe to move further ahead of the U.S. as Ursula von der Leyen is projecting based on trade agreements that they will make with other countries? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a real tough one, right? Each part of the world needs to look at the environment they're operating in, the political structures there. Of course, the European Union is set up very differently than any of our individual countries, right? So they need to find tools that will work well for them. Additionally, in Europe, you have a carbon pricing mechanism that's going to have an effect on industrial competitiveness. So they need to find smart ways to manage that as well. So it is a challenge we all face. So in the U.S., clearly we have political direction as far as how we are addressing the globally unfair trade. Europe has to find their own answers to those questions.
Ron, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I spent about half of my career in the U.S., and ArcelorMittal has a large footprint in the U.S. and continues to grow. And I would never bet against the U.S. I would not put my chips on the table for the EU or anybody else in the world against the U.S. It's been a resilient economy for generations, and I think it will continue to be. I think President Trump appreciates manufacturing in America, and he's trying to find the right policy and balance to ensure that there's manufacturing for decades to come. And I think that benefits every single person in this room and the thousands and tens of thousands of people that we represent. So I'm not betting against America.
Got it. Thank you. Nick, you want to add?
Yeah, you know, I look at it this way. You know, if other countries didn't want to do business in the U.S., they wouldn't be so concerned about the tariffs, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, they're concerned about the tariffs and doing business in the U.S. You know, the new administration's pushing hard on, you know, automotive manufacturing, steel manufacturing, and we only make about half the units of cars sold here in the U.S. And then we also, you know, import 25, 26 million tons of steel. So there's obviously room to improve on both of those sectors. And like Ron said, it will, you know, add many jobs and sustainability for this economy for years to come.
Well, you've moved into our next topic, which is great. Good segue into markets. And I want to talk a little bit about markets and how it's impacting today's steel industry. Folks, as you know, at last year's town hall, there was a lot of talk about how the steel industry was benefiting from President Biden's commitment of trillions of dollars to infrastructure development through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, all these bills that were passed by Congress during his term. And I quoted one Steel Association executive who said, for every $1 billion of infrastructure spend, it yielded 50,000 tons of steel. And I also remember the words of Nucor's Leon Topalian, who predicted this government investment could result in 6 to 8 million tons of additional steel consumption here in the U.S. over the next decade. Of course, now we've changed administrations, and we have Elon Musk and his Doge team attempting to cut government spending. Government infrastructure projects are just one of several steel markets I'd like to get your perspective on. So, gentlemen, let me run through the markets you serve and ask you for an update of where you see things heading in 2025. First, we might as well start with infrastructure. Given this new administration, what does the future hold for these infrastructure projects from the previous administration? I think many of you have benefited by those dollars, and you were very frank about that a year ago, or your counterparts were. What do you think is happening? Ben from SSAB.
Thanks, John. So infrastructure has really long timelines, you know, similar to steel mills, right? There's a lot of permitting, there's a lot of planning before the dollars actually get spent. So we are seeing that funding that was made available through the IRA or the BIL, those projects that are underway now are building roads and bridges. I actually saw some data from the American Road and Transportation Builders Association that the first couple months of 2025 are a significant uptick from where we were in 2024, and 2024 was actually an increase. So we've been talking about infrastructure for a very long time. I think a lot of people in this room know really the wretched state of bridges in the United States as well as roadways. There's a lot of investment that needs to take place, and the wheels have been turning on that. So we do see
You're
activity.
Optimistic.
The construction, particularly the municipal, the state and local roadways and bridges sector, we're seeing a lot more activity there.
But there are areas where there's some concern, and Nick, I think Cleveland Cliffs has had some fabulous projects approved, I believe, with DOE, Department of Energy.
Yeah, I think, you know, overall, you know, talking about infrastructure and previous administration approved projects, obviously there's some uncertainty as a lot of those are being reviewed. We think, you know, we had a couple DOE projects approved, one at our Butler, Pennsylvania plant, one at Middletown, Ohio. We feel like we're in alignment with the administration and where they want to go. So ultimately, the outcome of those, we're pretty optimistic that they'll go in our favor.
They're doing a review process now. They're
That's
reviewing
correct.
things that were previously approved.
That's correct, yeah.
But you're optimistic.
We are.
Others of you on this topic? Yeah, Trevor.
Yeah, I think once you remove the political flair on the top of infrastructure, you go visit the Army Corps of Engineers and you look at the report cards of American infrastructure and the status that we're in. We're all here. We talked about safety significantly throughout this conference. Like every one of us and our family members are driving across roads and bridges, and the shape that they're in poses a threat to the American people. And so generally what we found is there's been significant bipartisan support in and around infrastructure spending. So we've seen that the pace of shovel-ready projects have been delayed, but all in all, the need and the support to spend that infrastructure money, we are optimistic that that will continue to take place.
Great. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Similar in Canada, the failing infrastructure, and for decades, that's not been a priority of the government. And I think if there's been a positive outcome of the tariffs, they've looked inward. And so the premiers and the prime minister are absolutely committed to rebuilding infrastructure across Canada. And I think that's going to be very, very good for Canadian steel producers.
You had an interesting observation with me when we talked, and that was that the Buy American provisions in the U.S. are stronger than the Buy Canada provisions in Canada. True?
There were no Buy Canada provisions, so they're absolutely stronger.
Of course.
And but I will tell you that again, never waste a good crisis, and Prime Minister Carney is not wasting a crisis. He's facing it head on to say we have to reinvest in the country's infrastructure, whether it be rail, bridges, poles, all across, things that will be good for our industry. And Stelco's next door to me, and Nucor's next door to Stelco on our street, so it'll be good for all of us.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, that's going to be good for American steel companies, the infrastructure work in Canada, yes?
Yeah, I think, again, going back, Cliffs is my next door neighbor, and Nucor is Cliff's next door neighbor on Burlington Street in Hamilton, so I think we'll all benefit to some extent.
Good. I saw some hands.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we'll be happy to ship you anything you need up there, Ron.
I was just going to say, I don't think anyone on the panel or in the crowd, for that matter, would say that our infrastructure is in great shape in the United States, or maybe all of North America. And it's not just roads and bridges, right? It's energy delivery systems, right? From water to petroleum to everything that needs to be transferred to keep our country safe as we use these products. So I think, to Trevor's point, with politics aside, these projects have to move forward because it's part of it's for the safety of the American people and the North American people. So I think it's going to happen.
Aside from infrastructure, there's also just the general construction projects of private companies and the like. How important is that to your respective companies, and where do you see things going? Some concern about economic recession. I guess we're going to hear from the Fed Reserve Chair later today. Are you comfortable with what's happening in that particular market of steel? Go ahead, Nick, and then we'll go to Dan.
You know, I would just make the point of, I think we're in a bit of an awkward time, and you know, with Trump making the amount of changes that he has, it's almost paralyzed some of the industry, and it's slowed things down. But I think as people get through that initial change and see that everything's going to be okay. I mean, you know, you go home, you turn on the news right now, what's every second of the news? It's, well, you're going to be paying more, right? Which may or may not be true. But that's the message that's sent. So it's kind of stalled things out. Once, you know, we work through this initial phase of change, I think things will pick up and be a benefit to all of us.
Good, great, thank you. Dan, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can almost parallel this with infrastructure. We talk about what markets are going to grow, and I think it's every market, whether we're talking yellow goods markets from the constructability needs that need to happen across the country, whether we talk about data centers, we talk about products such as hot roll band that can go in tubular formations to build out those buildings. I think it's all expanding on our market. When we talk about the construction market particularly, you know, offerings that we have out there are excellent. And we look at what we can do from, metallizing homes, metallizing roofs, and really just adding value to the customer. I mean, you're talking a roofing system that can be guaranteed for 60 years. I mean, is revolutionary. There are still spots in the market outside of tariffs that there's ability for folks to capture and win.
You're talking about really changing steel applications.
Yes, and I think on the construction side, it's a great example of where we can see some of those possibilities.
Absolutely.
Let me move to another market, automotive. Some of you have already raised that topic, and I certainly think, the figure, I'm not sure which one of you raised these figures, but last year Americans purchased 16 million vehicles. About half of them were imports. American manufacturers made about 10 million vehicles, as I understand it. So given current government policy, and I know it changes day to day, I think the president just made a change the other day, what is the impact on steel and the automotive supply chain? Anyone of you want to take that? I know that some of you are big suppliers. Nick?
Yeah,
Cleveland Cliffs,
no doubt about it. Automotive is a key customer for us. We're a significant supplier to them. We plan on continuing that and hopefully even growing that. So, we look forward to onshoring more of the automotive build.
You think there'll be more manufacturing of automobiles in the U.S. as a result of this policy?
I do, in the long term.
And it is a long term.
I do. I think there's some initial capacity that the automotives can turn on a little quicker than having to build new facilities, but some of it's a long-term play as well.
Yeah. Others of you want to? Yes.
Yeah, John, I mean, the automotive industry, I think, in a lot of ways parallels the steel industry. We still have, as they do, a lot of capacity that's ready for growth. We've seen some of the, let's call it the big three, shift some production of current platforms back into the United States. We're poised and ready for that, but it's still a robust market. First quarter was actually more robust as we saw that. They think there might be maybe a little bit of softening, maybe 900 or so thousand units, but we're really yet to see that. So I think it's going to be another strong year for automotive and really a key component. The more we can bring within the states, I think is going to be absolutely beneficial to us.
Thank you. Ron, let me ask you about Canada, because if I researched this right, 1.2 million cars were made in Canada, but Canadians bought 2 million cars last year. How do you assess what's going on in the automotive supply chain?
Yeah, I think Dan raises a good point. There are many parallels between the automotive industry and the steel industry. These are big investments that the car companies are making. They want to seize more market share in North America. The supply chain folks that are sitting on this stage are a big part of them seizing more market share. So when they're at 16 million and above, it's good for all of us here on this stage. When they have long-term visibility on their investments and bringing that production back into Canada and the U.S., I think it's good for all of us.
Good. Let me ask you another market question. I know a few years ago we actually had a full panel discussion on energy. And when I interviewed candidate Trump last summer and asked him what he was going to do for the Pennsylvania economy, as a Pennsylvania journalist, I would ask that question. He said, the first thing he said was, "Drill, baby, drill." Well, he's been saying that a lot, and he keeps saying that over and over again. So I guess the question is, do you see yet an upswing in OCTG, all country tubular goods, that market? How important is this in the economy, in your business? What do you think is happening? Are we drill baby drilling? Last time I looked, the rig count wasn't all that impressive, but tell me. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, John. So I think the administration's been really aggressive in streamlining and eliminating redundancies in the permitting process. And that expedited permitting is meeting a response by the oil and gas industry of increased investment. In particular, I look at LNG terminals being approved, export terminals I'm talking about. So in order to export LNG, you need the transmission, you need storage, you need processing. All that's going to drive quite a lot of steel demand. So certainly do see the oil and gas sector as being helped by the current environment.
Others of you seeing an uptick? Dan from U.S. Steel, go ahead.
Yeah, John, I mean, drill, baby, drill. You know, I look at that meaning energy independence. And I love the position that the United States has to take advantage of that. You know, we see where WTI is or Brent crude is. It hasn't necessarily spawned, as you said, increasing rig counts, but there is an administration that is going to be opening the permitting, willingness to have those discussions so we can become much more energy independent. On the transmission side, our API line pipe business is extremely robust. We're seeing that infrastructure around that sort of growing. And when we talk robust, the book is open for 2026, so extremely good.
Good. Nick?
Yeah, no, I would just agree with Dan. I think for sure the consumable part of the oil and gas industry has picked up. So pipe, forgings for casings, pumps, those kind of components that you consume and go through as you drill more has picked up for sure.
Dan from Steel.
I was just going to say, for me, drill, baby, drill means removing the regulations and the barriers so that they can go after this energy that we need. But one thing they've done that kind of models what the steel industry's done in the last 10 years is they've become super efficient. Yeah. So those rigs are pumping out way more products than they used to in the past, which is kind of a headwind to how much raw materials they're going to use on those platforms.
That's a good point, because I know we can look at drill, you know, the rig counts, and I'm looking at it, it was, the count was 584 a couple days ago, I think, when I looked at it. That's down 30 from a year ago. But if they are more efficient and they reach more and they extract more.
And I believe they're at near record production levels right now with a lower rig count.
With a lower rig count. So we got to be careful about using rig counts like we often do. Anyone else have a final? Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I think as we think about energy security, I think it's a national security issue as well. When we're not buying from Canada or United States, we're buying from adversaries in many cases. And drill, baby, drill in both countries. I think Dan's point on the line pipe is also critically important. Both the current administration in the US and in Canada understand that we need the transmission lines, and they want to improve the permitting issues in both countries, the permitting timelines in both countries. So we're seeing an uptick in both downhole oil country tubular goods and line pipe.
Yeah. Well, the line pipe also, with respect to liquefied natural gas, as you try to move the gas from areas of western Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, where I live, to Philadelphia and other parts of other ports where it can be exported. My only concern there is that I don't want to see my home gas prices go up because we're sending more of our gas to some foreign country. But that's another discussion for another day, and personal, I would say. Markets, another market. Solar, wind, any of these clean energy. As we know, the president, we're going to talk a little more about the environment but in a second, but let me just ask about, in terms of products as a market, where are we? Anybody seeing any movement on solar or wind or any of those kinds of product lines? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so clean energy is a huge part of our business, particularly wind tower, and it's tremendously steel intensive. So wind energy, generally onshore wind, takes about 100 tons of steel per megawatt of installed capacity. Solar is quite substantial too. It's about 40 tons per megawatt of installed capacity. So we are continuing to see a good level of activity in the renewable energy market. I think another point really to highlight is, as we grow more renewable energy in this country, we have to grow the grid. And so we are seeing some grid investments, and of course the towers, the cabling, the transformers, all are pretty steel intensive. So there's a lot of opportunity associated with the energy production in the transmission side.
Nick?
Yeah, I don't know how big the current administration is on wind. I think
there's a concern about
Mr.
birds.
Trump has spoken about that a few times, but I think I think solar is still an option, and then nuclear as well. And to Ben's point he made about investment to the grid, obviously we're still the sole domestic supplier of Go Steel, and we look forward to hopefully helping the grid out.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. No comment. I won't go there. I did want to ask, in terms of a market, I found this brought a smile to my face when I learned about this. And Dan, this is to Dan from Steel Dynamics. I remember a town hall not too many years ago when the arch enemy of steel was aluminum. Remember those days? Remember those days? Concerned because they were lighter weight than steel, and particularly in the automotive industry. So when I heard about Steel Dynamics investing in aluminum through a company called Aluminum Dynamics, I just had to smile. And so let me just ask you, Dan, if you could just real quickly tell us about SDI's new baby called ADI. Is this something that we're going to see the steel industry now taking over the aluminum industry? Is this just another way of capturing a once former competitor?
Well, what I would say is for Steel Dynamics, our plan is to grow, but to grow strategically. And we find a way to grow right now is by potentially revolutionizing aluminum production in North America. Kind of similar to what happened with steel production 50 years ago in North America. And we see an opportunity there. There probably will be some competition for certain products between steel and aluminum, but most of what we're going to take advantage of is beverage cans, some automotive supply that's more exposed to automotive that our steel mills currently don't participate in, but hopefully will in the future, and then industrial aluminum. So it's a large investment for us, and kind of the key to our investment is we're building a 650,000 ton rolling mill that's supplying into an underserved market. So that market currently in North America is severely undersupplied. So we feel like there's a significant advantage to bringing on low carbon, low cost aluminum and bringing that to the market.
So ADI is not competing against SDI?
We don't believe it will. At some point, we may bump heads on certain products.
Anyone else on the panel have any comments about aluminum? Any of you going to go into the aluminum business?
We'll sell you some.
Dan, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Before I move on to the next topic, I did want, as a journalist, I said to Dan Colleen that I wanted very much if he was comfortable talking about the U.S. Steel Nippon transaction. Because when you have someone from U.S. Steel here and you don't ask about it, it seems like we're failing in our responsibility. And so I wanted to give Dan a chance to update us as best you can on the U.S. Steel Nippon transaction. As everyone knows, initially, Nippon Steel offered to buy U.S. Steel for $14 billion and then invest substantially in its American facilities, especially in my home area, the Mon Valley of Pittsburgh. U.S. Steel shareholders accepted the offer, but both President Biden and President Trump have sought to block the deal, saying U.S. Steel must remain an American majority-owned company. In other words, substantial foreign investment in ownership, that's okay. Foreign control, no. To quote President Trump from just a few weeks ago, quote, "We don't want it to go to Japan or any other place, and we're working with them," unquote. So Dan, if you could just take maybe 3 minutes and help us to understand, where are we with this transaction right now?
Yeah, certainly, John. You know, I think there's a couple milestones that will come up here. Within about the third week of this month, CFIUS will issue their decision. And keep in mind, or their ruling. And keep in mind, you know, we asked the Trump administration to go back to CFIUS, which we were granted the ability to go back for a re-review. Then the timing from there is, 15 days for Trump to ultimately take the guidance of CFIUS and move from there. But just to go back and talk about the merits of this deal, and the merits of this deal are profound and many. First of all, when we talk about return for our investors and our stakeholders, The $55 share price, just outstanding. John, you touched upon a little bit about the $2.7 billion of investment, one in the Mon Valley for a hot mill, and closer to my heart, rehabilitating and relining Blast Furnace 14. All that investment going directly into units that are controlled and run by United Steelworkers. So it is extremely impactful for our team members. And sort of pivoting to our team members, you know, we have been on this journey. Come August will be 2 years. Anytime there's M&A activity, no matter what side you're on, it is a distraction, and I think we have to recognize it as a distraction. I can't say enough about our team members from the front line, focusing on what they can control. First and foremost, so we heard a lot about it last night, talking about safety and keeping everybody intact has been outstanding. So really hats off. And to the folks in this room, the supplier base, I know a lot of folks are out there trying to make decisions on contracts and decisions on investments. Our supplier base, our contractors, our engineers, our partners out here have been extremely impactful in helping us through this transaction. But really our communities, you know, I spent time in the Mon Valley, I spent time in Braddock, I spent a lot of my time in Gary, to understand that when you have investment, you have sustainability moving forward. And our footprint in those cities that have been there with us year over year, time over time, through our historic, over 100 years history of this company is going to remain. And that's extremely impactful to those stakeholders. We're very bullish on this deal getting done. It's an outstanding opportunity to still be U.S. steel, controlled in America, mine melted and made in the United States.
Dan, thank you very much for that update. I appreciate it. We've got 2 more topic areas before we turn to Q&A. I hope you've submitted questions. I know it's up there, townhall@AIST.org. We're going to talk about the environment next. And, you know, at last year's town hall, I sort of said this in the introduction, we spent a lot of time talking about green steel and decarbonization. We're not going to rehash all of that now, but your companies have been engaged in major investments to make cleaner steel, setting and sometimes even exceeding your carbon reduction goals. And while government requirements may have pushed things along, I also understand that more of your customers are asking for cleaner steel. So now President Trump claims that he has ended the Green New Deal, something that never passed Congress in the first place, but he says it, and there's no doubt that he supports fossil fuels and drill baby drill and all these things, less environmental regulations that we've talked about. So how does that affect your steel production, or how do you treat the environment around your facilities? With the basic question, is it still full speed ahead on green steel and decarbonization at your company? Why or why not? And any one of you can take, you want Ben? Ben,
Yeah.
you're going to tell me how great SSAB is.
I am.
Because it's a leader. It has been a leader in decarbonization. Go right ahead. Be our first.
Yeah, so for SSAB, I'd like to highlight our low-emission steel products. So SSAB Zero, SSAB Fossil Free, allows us to partner with like-minded companies, other companies that want to be leaders in sustainability. You know, we are able to give them zero CO2 steel that they're then able to integrate into their products. We're actually members of the First Movers Coalition, so in addition to meeting their requirements for emissions associated with steel production, it also makes us look into low CO2 ways of doing other things. So we become a consumer then of, you know, in more environmentally friendly technologies as we make these steels.
Did you tell me you have an EAF mill now that produces essentially no carbon steel?
That's right. So that would be our SSAB Zero product primarily. So our Iowa steel mill, we have a great relationship with Mid-American Energy. They offer us certified nearly 100% green energy. Of course, Iowa is in the middle of wind country, as we appreciate on a daily basis in Iowa. But in addition to that, when we're making SSAB Zero, we use biological substitutes for the small amount of carbon that we do need to use in the process, and fuels as well. We use biological when we're making SSAB Zero. So that we do have third-party certification, 0.0 kilograms per kilogram of steel produced.
So it's still full speed ahead for you.
It is, absolutely. And another important part for SSAB is the conversion to EAF. So in North America, we're already 100% EAF. Our European production platforms are converting to EAF pretty rapidly. So actually, our first mill in Oxelösund, Sweden is going to go start up their EAF next year, 2026. And we're already signing contracts and moving well ahead with the second steel mill. So all of Europe will be EAF in the future.
Dan KEOWN at SDI. I think you told me that SDI is all in. Steel Dynamics is all in with this.
We're all in, and to your point, our customers are driving us to be all in. So, and a lot of it started with our European customers who have been chasing this sustainability for a lot of years. And now they've driven it to their suppliers. And now what we're seeing is the North American industries are following suit. So our customers are demanding that we lower our carbon footprint. We have several projects in place. We have a biomass project that's going to produce biocarbon from wood products down in Columbus, Mississippi, to replace our coal usage at all of our major steel mills.
Is this the BioCoke?
This is the biocarbon facility, yes. And it's going to produce enough biocarbon, at least our first facility, to replace all the coal at our large flat roll mills and our structural and rail mill. So it's a significant project that'll lower our Scope 1 carbon emissions about 35%. So it's like I said, it's full steam ahead for Steel Dynamics, but also part of that is we have 100% nuclear attestations for our Sinton, Texas mill and our Butler, Indiana mill. So we are fully going after renewable energy and carbon-free energy to make these low-carbon products also.
Yes, Dan, go ahead, U.S. Steel.
Yeah, John, I think it's important to talk about not only what's going on or how we're moving forward, but what has changed. You know, if I would sit here 10 years previous and think about our platform at U.S. Steel, we now have 6 million tons EAF capacity, which was a tremendous move and shift in that direction. We think about BRS startup, first coil, 100% clean energy with the solar partnership that took place down there. But then we also think about what are we doing moving forward. We think about carbon-free in the ability to take our blast furnace gas, make calcium carbide, actually capture that blast furnace gas and even lower our traditional footprint for CO2 on a fully integrated operation is moving forward. So I think it's a good balance. It certainly has not stopped. I don't want anyone to go away and even think that, because there are things moving forward. A lot of other folks have talked about customer demand. Our Verdex offering, I think, matches a lot of our customer demand for what we see, but still moving forward, and it needs to.
So, yeah, Trevor, go ahead. What's Nucor with respect to decarbonization and this whole process? Still on board?
Yeah, I mean, I guess initially I'd like to declare Nucor's been green before it was cool since 1960. So we've been, just the consumption of scrap. I had the luxury of attending a Smithsonian event that we contributed a part of the original polarizer shredder in America from long ago that revolutionized how America was able to respond to the war and clean up the streets by getting cars and other tractors and stuff off of America in support of the war. And there was a campaign in and around how environmentally friendly this was back in the 1960s. And so the beginning of Nucor has always been green. And so to talk about our ability to, are we full steam ahead, we're just getting better with time. And our ability to sit back as the leader in sustainability and quarterback where we would like to deploy dollars that generate a return and enhance our value proposition to our customer base who is demanding green steel. We view ourselves to be in really, really good shape, and a project that we are actively participating in is our CCS project in Nucor Steel, Louisiana, to where we are taking DRI, taking a rich CO2 stream and working with Exxon. I think we talked about that last year in partnership, and that project still continues to move full speed ahead. So we believe that we are sitting at a point of strength because it's a part of our story for our entire existence.
Great. I appreciate you making those comments. It's very interesting. Ron, I wanted to ask you about ArcelorMittal, particularly Dofasco, because you told me, and then you repeated it again this morning when we were together, about the fact that Dofasco is a steel plant in the middle of a city, Hamilton, Ontario, for those who may not be familiar. And that presents some challenges, particularly with local officials who have voted 14-0, against Dofasco's license to operate, which of course was totally symbolic because they didn't have the power to shut you down. But it's an example of sort of the environmental pressures on political people, particularly when you're in a neighborhood that's directly affected. And we could say this about the Mon Valley as well, in the sense that neighbors near those steel mills in the Mon Valley, near the Coke facility, have always had issues. How do you deal with that? And maybe you could explain a little more about what happens in Canada.
Yeah, thank you. We were talking a little bit about it before we came on stage, and as I think about green, ArcelorMittal spending money in Canada and the United States and Mexico. We've got electric arc furnaces in Mexico, electric arc furnaces going in Calvert, Alabama. We have our own DRI plants in Quebec, our own DR pellet plants in Quebec. So we continue to invest in green steel production. But I was mentioning earlier, the city of Hamilton, the city is actually in the middle of our steel plant. We're not in the middle of the city. And so we're producing up to 5 million tons of production. It's all out on the city streets. For those of you that have been there, you see the coil handlers driving down city streets, some of the busiest streets in Canada. And so the City Hall voted 14-0 to revoke our license. The city doesn't issue a license for us to operate. But it was very symbolic. The province of Ontario gives us our license to operate. They sent the motion from the city to the province of Ontario and said, we voted 14-0. Dofasco should no longer be able, after 112 years, to operate in the city of Hamilton. Now, I would say that I'm very proud of our record in the city of Hamilton. I'm very proud of the way we present ourselves in the city. Team Orange, our employees are out in the community adding value in big ways every single day. But that doesn't matter. I think many new people, the population's around 700,000. Dan and I were talking. Dan and I used to work in Hamilton together 20 years ago. The pressure was fairly low from the community. That's not where we're at now. People are taking pictures, they're posting on internet, and there's not a willingness to have a steel plant. It's not in my backyard, kind of on steroids. And so, we're responsible steel certified, as is Big River. We're very proud of that. 14-0 came after responsible steel certification. So we have to be cognizant of that. Everybody in the room has to be cognizant of the concept of social license to operate. How do we show up in the communities in which we operate? How do we show up as suppliers, as contractors, as peers? What are we doing? I was at Congress yesterday. API has an ad the size of that wall, the American Petroleum Institute. I don't know that we're doing the same thing from a steel perspective. So I met with that mayor, and I showed her that we've had fewer emissions than we've had in 112 years. I showed her that bleeder emissions on our furnaces are all but gone. Pushing emissions on the coke plants are all but gone. And she said, I don't care. She looked me in the eyes and she said, I don't care. I want zero because my constituents demand zero from me. And so it was sobering for me. I meet with employees almost every day, and I remind them of our responsibility to be good stewards of the community And good stewards of the community has meant different things to me over a 38-year span, but I'm on heightened alert about this concept of social license to operate. Absolute heightened alert. And when I hear the Mon Valley is going to get investment, if the deal goes through, that's good. They're under tremendous pressure in Allegheny County. And I think unless we're out in the country, the citizens of the cities are going to be very, very aware of our presence in those cities. And they're not looking at the hundreds of thousands of jobs we provide across America and across Canada, or the value we bring to the community. They're looking at stacks. We have 170 stacks at Dofasco. And they're looking at that and the big machines on the highway and the congestion around our plant that the city is in the middle of. So it's forcing us to recalibrate and to keep a real focus on that community in every community that we operate in across the globe.
Thank you very much for that perspective. And it sort of leads into the final environmental question real quick. I'm going to turn to Nick on this one. But Ron, at Dofasco, you're switching from blast furnace from the integrated to EAFs, right?
Correct.
And arguably, some would argue that is a cleaner technology. Nucor would certainly say from the get-go. The question I have is there an ideal mix for blast furnaces and EAF-based steel production? Does the world need more blast furnaces, or are we at the right limit? Nick, give us your thoughts on that one.
Okay, so looking at numbers, right? The U.S. is 70% EAF, 30% blast furnace.
Right.
And then you look at globally, it's like 75% blast furnace to 25% EAF. So I'll answer this question a bit general, but the first part of it, do we need blast furnaces? And the answer is yes. There's products and segments that we make and produce that, you know, over the 30 plus years of EAFs, they have yet to be able to do all of it. They've made progress, but it's not quite there. And so blast furnaces are still needed. What the right ratio is, I think depends on what manufacturing is done in your country, and how much you need to supply of that as automotive maybe comes back and onshores more. As that picks up, will there be a need for more blast furnaces? Maybe, at least to operate the ones we have fully, I'll say that. So, you know, I think there's going to be a bit to figure out as things develop and as we see, hopefully, manufacturing come back. But for sure, there's a need for blast furnaces, and we fully believe that. And I would just say, just to comment on the last piece, is, you know, I think a lot of the things were said correctly, and obviously we have responsibility to push carbon reduction and our environmental performance. At Cliffs, we look at our permits are our license to operate. And any violation to that, shame on us, and we got to do better. So we take it very seriously. I think that's why you see Cliffs blast furnaces operate more efficiently, at least from an emission standpoint, than the rest of the world. And it all ties back to tariffs and the economy, and like Trevor said up front, a healthy steel industry, because being green or doing projects that lower carbon are expensive. This is not a cheap industry. You know, we talk about building plants to reduce carbon emissions like Big River. Those are in the billions of dollars. So you have to have a healthy market, a healthy industry, healthy companies that can reinvest in those types of things.
I have to move us along if we're going to get to Q&A. Dan, you wanted to make a quick comment on this?
I think just a little, excuse me, a little different perspective on that maybe Trevor would agree with. I think it's not too much of a stretch to envision a steel industry maybe without blast furnaces or at least the current state of blast furnaces. So technology would have to change for us to remain sustainable to pull steel, or steel and iron from blast furnaces. That's kind of the way we envision it, right? I think Trevor would also say, we've really improved the products coming out of electric arc furnaces, and give us 10, 20, 30 more years, it's going to continue to evolve and improve to where we're all going to be great competitors for the same product, right? And if sustainability continues to drive the products, we're going to have to find a way to get away from using a lot of carbon in these processes.
Any last thoughts on this real quick? Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, John, I think it's a balance, and I think it's a balance between what the customers are going to drive and what they're asking for. There is ways, and I think that's one of the great benefits of NSC coming on with us, you know, as world leaders in especially big blast furnace technology, reducing that carbon, other things looking at carbon capture. But really, you know, from the U.S. Steel position, that flexibility that we have on the footprint, I don't know if we could answer the question, but I could definitely say we can react with it.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Ron, last word.
Yeah, I think just real quickly, at Dofasco, we've had electric arc furnaces for 26 years. Over 45% of our production is from electric arc furnace today, and we have 2 blast furnaces. We operate those blast furnaces responsibly, and I'm not ready to give up on blast furnace technology yet. If I could move my kitchen and living room into the cast house floor, I probably would. So I'm aligned with Nick, not so quick on blast furnaces.
Great, thank you all very much. I want to take 5 minutes on our last topic, and then we'll move to George and Ron on Q&A. And this question I've asked before, this is on workforce, and we've already touched on it. I think, Ron, you in particular and others have mentioned the importance of attracting people to the steel industry. And I also think, I may be wrong about this, but I think this is probably the first panel where the majority of panelists are not baby boomers. We're seeing the change in generation in the leadership of the steel industry. And we'll find out in a second, because I'm going to ask for a show of hands. I did this last year. Some of you may remember this. I want to know, if you're a boomer born in 1964 or earlier, like me, raise your hands. Not a single person on the stage. And more than a few out there in the audience. Great. Raise your hand if you're a Gen Xer born 1965 through and including 1980. Any Gen Xers? Yeah. Gee, 5 of our 6 panelists. Good. Now, if you're like my kids, are you a millennial born 1981 through 1996? 1981 through.
Wow.
There we got
Great.
Trevor up there, already a leader. Look at that. Yeah, awesome. Now, this is the operative question. Ron, you talked about bringing young people into the steel industry. Do we have any Gen Zers here born 1997 or later?
Oh,
Yeah, look, we got a whole bunch. How about a round of applause for these folks? So, I'm going to ask each of you 30 seconds. Don't take more than 30 seconds. Be quick. And I apologize, but we do want to get to the Q&A. We've talked about, Ron, you've raised the question, I've raised it in countless town halls about changing the perception of the steel industry and how we change it. Some of you others have talked about this as well. So that there's a greater ability to attract some of these Gen Zers that we see in the audience here today. But I just want to ask real quick, what do you think is the best way to attract young, bright, skilled people to your companies? And we'll run right down the list, and we'll start with Trevor at Nucor.
Man, that's a hard thing to do in 30 seconds.
I know it is, and I apologize, but you're going to do it.
So 10 years ago, I sat in the same room, and Dan D'Amico was on stage. And I sat in the room, and one thing that he did that I think communicates how we do that is something I want to steal. And if all Nucor teammates please stand up, if you don't mind. Half of Nucor today has been with us less than 5 years. And there are people here that I've mentored and have mentored me. So the cultural connectivity and communication of how cool it is to be a part of the industry, but most importantly, how important it is to be a part of the family. This is how we protect and recruit the next generation. So I just want to thank y'all.
Thank you, guys. You all set?
All right.
We do that for every company here. It's going to take us 20 minutes. There'll be no Q&A.
I won't ask the SCB folks to stand up, but I do want to say that we really actively prioritize managing this issue, trying to expose our different groups to generational differences. Of course, we do apprenticeships, we do co-ops, allows us to work side by side with new talent, helping to impart skills, but also learn from each other as far as generational differences. And I'd like to switch gears for a second, put on my AIST Foundation hat. I am a foundation trustee. I want to say that we've had a great year in foundation. We actually placed 49 students in industry for working this coming summer, which is a record for us. We've been giving over $1 million a year towards both the student interns, but then also faculty, curriculum development, making sure that the universities in North America continue to have steel-based programs. And so students are getting exposed to that.
And I know you've just raised a lot of money.
We did.
To keep doing it.
And we need to keep doing it. And honestly, I think there's so much opportunity still for all the folks in this room. I encourage you to proactively engage AIST Foundation. We certainly want your money and support, but we also want you engaging, reaching out, calling us up. Hey, give me that list of student interns. We want to hire one this summer.
Great. Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you for the work with the foundation. Dan, how do you attract U.S. Steel, folks to U.S. Steel?
I think I go back and look at the industry and ask the fundamental question: Is this a dying industry, or is this a growing industry? It's absolutely a growing industry with opportunity, and nothing provides opportunity like investment. When you have investment, you're going to attract the best talent, you're going to attract the best workforce, you're going to be able to retain the best workforce, and I think we're very bullish on seeing that, especially with our partnership.
Right. Thank you. Nick, at Cliffs.
Yeah, within Cliffs, you know, we endorse and push great foundations like this and organizations as AIST. I think that's a big piece to draw, you know, new young engineers and/or managers. And then we've focused a lot on the training we do and continue to improve that. And then, you know, like everybody else said, I think offering, you know, growth and that potential is big with our young folks. And, you know, they don't want to be stuck in a position for it seems like more than a couple of years. So you got to keep it fresh, and you got to keep them moving along.
Good thoughts. Great. Thank you. Dan at Steel Dynamics, what are you doing?
A couple things we wholeheartedly believe in is people want to know they're going to be safe when they come to work in our industry. So providing that safe workspace is super important, and making sure people understand that. And then our entrepreneurial culture that we provide, it just attracts the best of the best talent. And that culture kind of drives the success of our company, and it also drives people to want to know how are they being that successful, and I want to be a part of that. So those are some of our drivers in 30 seconds.
That's great. No, that's perfect. Ron, ArcelorMittal.
I think, first of all, as an industry, we have a lot to be proud of, and coming to these events and seeing how proud each of us are, taking that back to our plants is a big thing for our industry. At ArcelorMittal, for over 5 decades, we've had a slogan over the bridge that says, our product is steel and our strength is people. And our people make a difference in Hamilton every single day. For me as a leader, getting out and speaking to them where they work, having them to my office to break bread and tell me what they're going through. People are absolutely the core foundation of everything we do at Dofasco.
I want to say before I turn this over to George that Ron BEDARD wins frankly, the attire award. Has anyone seen his socks?
I've been staring at them all day, John.
Is it troubling you?
Yeah, it's a little worrisome.
Got a little Canadian name. And is that a moose? I don't know what
There's a moose, there's a bear, a maple leaf.
They're awesome. Thank you, Ron. Let's go to Ron and
All right,
George.
thank you to John, down on to our panelists, and all of you, because we've got some really great questions. We've lined up 10 of them, We've got just about 10 minutes to go, so there's your cue for how we would ask you to reply. All right, first question. The industry's made massive investments to evolve our production supply, but we haven't necessarily made a similar commitment to evolving society's perception of our industry. What can we do to convince society that steel is safe, green, and smart, and to recognize that steel can improve the quality of life and that steel is a solution and not always the problem?
We could spend a whole panel, an hour on this one. Anyone quickly, very quickly, go ahead.
I think how we show up in the community is a big part of that. How we represent the products that we make in North America. We're on the leading edge globally. We have to be out there talking about the products and the benefits the steel industry brings to North America.
And I believe we need
Different idea? Go ahead.
we need a collective marketing effort, all these companies together, to show people what we do in the steel
An
industry and
association
how we
of
do
some
it.
And maybe through platforms as such.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other additional thoughts, new thoughts?
Just infinitely recyclable. We really need to share that message.
How recyclable the industry is. Good. Great question.
All right, we got another one here on workforce related. Do we need more skilled trades like mechanics and electricians? And if so, what can we do to improve access to those skilled trades and that personnel for our industry here in North America?
Yeah, Nick, go ahead.
We're growing our own. Apprenticeship programs is where we've had to go. So we're a full believer and push on growing our own trades crafts.
Others? New course?
Yeah, similarly, I mean, I do think same thing for the industry is collectively communicating the value and opportunity. You know, when I first joined the industry, you asked people, would you want your kids to work in this industry? And 20 years ago, there was a collective no. And so if you think about the kitchen room tables, dining room table conversation, we need to continue to change that and then push our kids, future kids, toward trades and toward the industry.
And are we training kids in the high school level for the skilled trades? Because college isn't for everybody, right? I don't know, Dan, were you going to go that way or not?
Yeah, I think one of the key messages is, and maybe it was an old paradigm that we thought of college being the answer, the skilled trades, electrical, mechanical, what we need. These are wonderful jobs that have great opportunities, and I think we need to champion that message. That'll help everyone.
They also pay.
Very well.
Okay. In North America, steel production and steel consumption are near equilibrium. This balance ensures a competitive market. China, however, produces a huge surplus, which drives global overcapacity for steel. This huge imbalance affects the global raw materials markets as well as the finished steel markets. When and how can we finally deal with this elephant in the room?
Any of you have a solution to the China problem?
I mean,
We've talked about it for years. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we already talked about tariffs. Certainly that has to be a piece of it. There might be other creative ways, but we have to understand that, you know, outside of the borders of our country, there's a global steel market, and that's going to put intense pressure on us, and we need protection.
Thank you, Nick.
They wouldn't do it if they weren't enabled to do it, right? So everybody globally has enabled it. Well, if no one bought their steel, guess what they would do? They would not make it. So I think between tariffs and other, you know, rules or policy by other countries, we'll at least get it back in line to where it should be.
Good.
Okay, next question. Electrochemical iron making or iron smelting is a technology in early development, but it holds great promise in the terms of decarbonization, especially as a replacement for the blast furnace. Do you think it has the potential to be disruptive for the global steel production?
Interesting question. Anyone want to take it?
I would say we don't necessarily know what technology is going to take off, but there is going to be technology developed to help us be a more sustainable industry and make lower embodied carbon products. So those technologies are coming. Whether this one's it's a potential. It might be it, but we don't know yet. It's a little too early.
Yeah, I just think new technology in itself is disruptive, and we as a group of industry participants, we have to watch and participate and make selective choices as to how we want to get involved. But I think all of it has potential. Too early to determine which one is the right one, but it's coming.
At ArcelorMittal, we have thousands of people in global R&D that are always looking at leading edge technologies, and also we invest in leading technologies in the companies that provide those technologies. And so I think, as Dan said, that as the right technologies are proven, we'll start adopting them globally at ArcelorMittal.
Good.
Okay, we talk a lot about China, China, China. We just hit on that one. But is there anyone concerned, or should we be concerned about the rapid ascent of India's steel industry?
You want to take that, Ron?
It's a big number 2 out there right now. Number 1, China, number 2, India, and then the distant move to number 3, Japan at that point.
Yeah, ArcelorMittal is making big investments in India. I think India is developing. And I think India also has a tremendous, insatiable appetite for steel products to build out their country. And so we're bullish on India, but not for export to Canada and the North American market. We service those with our assets in North America, but to service the Indian market.
Right. Other thoughts on India? Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to talk about tariffs, just to touch back on that a little bit. And tariffs aren't specifically, for China. Okay, it's leveling across the board. It's understanding what comes in not only from India but even emerging markets in Africa that is going to be there. Let's call it in the next 20, 30 years. So it's just a good, solid platform to protect and level our playing fields.
All right, we're going to keep it moving here. This is more technical nature here, one. How do you see the demand for DRI, direct reduced iron, evolving in the North American steel industry as we move ahead here?
Anybody? Go ahead.
I think that's easy to answer. I think it's when we talk about new technologies, but I think the one thing we understand what's here and now and what works. I think that's a model that has been proven, and that's a model that's going to grow.
Ben, did you want to?
Yeah, and we had the blast furnace discussion earlier. We haven't built a new one since 1980. We're not going to build new ones. So DRI is the most technically advanced solution to get ore-based metallics into our industry. There may be other technologies come down the pike, but DRI is the one, aside from blast furnaces, that gets the job done.
Yeah, obviously we are a couple decades into running DRI facilities and believe it's a significant advantage on the decarbonization journey. So we believe that some iteration of that technology will continue, especially as CCS opportunities like we're currently exploring come into the picture.
Got it.
We have 2 DRI facilities in Canada, an HBI facility in Texas, and they're part of our low embodied carbon product offering solution. So we use them daily.
Got it. Go ahead, George.
Next question from the audience. In your view, where can generative AI have the greatest impact in your operations?
There's another one you could probably talk forever on. Go ahead.
Yeah, so talking about AI generally.
Generative AI.
Yeah. So I think AI is super interesting. We're actually one of the pioneers in using advanced artificial intelligence in industry. I don't know if anybody in the room's ever been frustrated by a rolling mill and having to teach it how to roll a certain product before rolling a different product. That's because it's a machine learning algorithm that runs the thing. And we were one of the first industries to adapt that technology. So I think we will continue to be very proactive in adopting AI specific to generative. I think it's a little unclear at this point exactly how it adds value. Certainly, we do a lot of professional tasks. Folks are looking at how generative AI can help us with those sorts of things, eliminate routine. It's not steel specific, it's any business, but certainly it will change our industry as it's changing all industries. Yet to be seen some of those details.
Trevor, go ahead.
Yeah, I think generative AI is probably a tad slow as to what we could likely benefit from. I would phrase that as agentic AI is probably next to where we have the opportunity from an industry where you could interface and interact and have an overlay over a collection of systems. So if you think about safety from an application perspective, if we could take all safety incidents in this room, thump them in a system, have agentic AI to interact and pull correlations and have conversational interactions to arrive at the best sorted or suited implementation for all of us to rally around. I think that that's kind of the next phase. So I would say agentic AI, more than generative AI, is the next frontier.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next question. We beat up the tariff question pretty good, but here's a tariff question. In your view, how likely is it that tariffs will further aggravate inflation and ultimately drive down steel demand?
Tariffs driving down steel demand?
Well, I touched on it earlier. I think we're kind of in that awkward phase, and I think once we get through that, I think it'll move through.
Yeah, I think we all feel the same way. Domestically, I think we're going to see demand improve as a result of tariffs. Globally, it may have a different impact, but at least domestically, we're going to see a benefit from it.
And I think uncertainty is what drives demand, or up or down. Tariffs itself, the tool, I wouldn't blame directly correlates to soften demand.
Yeah, I mean, pricing is a key component to understanding demand, and I think we've seen the increase in pricing, so I think that's positive. I think the biggest question is how long, and I think that'll be impactful as we sort of all monitor that moving forward.
All right, we got two more questions, so this is it, the big finish here. All right, around the world we see talk and even some developing projects to decouple iron production from steel production. Does this strategy make sense for North America?
Decoupling iron from steel. Anybody?
I might take a swing at that. I think it's really interesting how technologies change. And we talked a little bit about aluminum. If you look at where aluminum plants are in North America right now, they largely, the aluminum smelting was placed close to cheap electricity. So Tennessee Valley Authority built a bunch of hydropower. A smelter was one of their first main customers to take some of that base load. So it could be that steelmaking technologies in the future are more energy intensive, and energy logistics drive where we locate steel mill versus the logistics of raw materials like iron ore. So if we find that some of the new technologies for making iron are really about where do I have energy, where do I have stranded energy, certainly DRI, the history of DRI, we've seen DRI plants where there's stranded natural gas, and it's a way to take advantage of that energy source. So if you make DRI close to the energy, it certainly makes sense that you might transport that then to the steel making closer to our customers.
Consistent with Ben's comments, if you look at our HBI facility, it's a deep water port with ample low-cost energy in Texas, and our DRI facilities are in Quebec, low-cost energy and close to the mines in Quebec. So I absolutely agree with Ben.
Good. All right, a little bit of a segue with our last question around clean energy. Steel production is extremely energy intensive, primarily around iron. Clean energy, how do we view the potential of nuclear energy and SMR, small modular reactors, to power our steel mills in the future?
Do we see that coming, nuclear powering steel mills?
We're huge supporters of nuclear energy to definitely to supply to the electrical grid. It's going to be cleaner power all the way around. TVA, our power supplier in Columbus, is already looking at SMR technology, and they've started a project, and we hope that continues, right? Because that'll just continue to green the grid.
Great.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, nuclear, but yeah, Clips is on board with SMRs as well, and you know, we see that kind of being the future for clean energy.
Good. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, just one reason that nuclear pairs particularly well with steel is we run 24/7 operations. Nuclear produces energy 24/7. So it's a better coupling with our needs than intermittent renewables.
Yeah, I think identifying energy sources that provide stable, baseload, economic, clean power. There are few sources that fit that box, and nuclear is one of the sources that fit that box for a steel industry.
Just one last comment on that. I think reliability is a key also. Yeah. We have to have a reliable grid, right? Well, depending on how clean we get it, it has to be reliable to support our industry.
It's a total portfolio. It's everything. It's still capturing our strength with natural gas. It's nuclear, it's wind, it's hydro, it's everything.
Great. Is that it? How about a big round of applause for this panel? What a great panel. Thank you all very much.
All right. Now listen, before we close, I do want to remind everyone that lunch will be provided for all the conference registrants immediately hereafter in the exhibit hall. We look forward to seeing all of you there to help continue the debate from this morning. I want to once again thank the Systems Group for their sponsorship of the town hall and as the premier sponsor here at AISTech this year. I also want to thank Centro Metal Cut and Midal for the coffee service this morning, as well as Morgan Engineering for the water service. And for sponsoring the upcoming exhibit hall luncheon, we have to thank Andritz Metals, Bogner, D&L Inc., and Fluor. And don't forget, we're going to give away a 2025 Chevy Silverado pickup this afternoon. We're going to give that away at 2:30 p.m. in the exhibit hall. You can visit that giveaway booth now. You have all the way up until 2:30 to get your entry in for the drawing. Now you have to be present to win, though, and I wish you all good luck with that truck. We want to thank our moderator, John Delano. We want to thank our wonderful panelists. We want to thank our wonderful panelists for their spirited debate here with us this morning, and of course, all of you in the audience for joining us today. Nothing happens unless you show up. Let's give everyone a final round of applause. Thank you. This does conclude our program.